chapter 3, talking about shapes. So we looked at text, how to animate, and some specific things that were covered in chapter 2 that will carry over into chapter 3. But I want to talk about shapes and creating shapes and what you can do with that kind of creation. So I've already created a composition and I just called it chapter 3, creating shapes. And so looking at shapes, we're going to look at two variations, okay? You can either create a shape to be used as a shape, or we can create a shape to be used as a mask. And now, later on in chapter 3, I think about video 4 or 5, we're going to look at masks, what you can do with those. But we're going to start with just creating shapes. And remember, there are multiple ways to do things or to create different layers. So we can either right click inside the timeline to create a new shape. All right, we can look at the shape layer. We can select the layer, all right, and click and create new shape layer. Okay, or we can even select our shape tool, all right, which is up here within our timeline, so we can create a different shape. Now, let's look at the first one. I want to look at shape creation by just right clicking, okay, either right clicking down the timeline or even the layer selection up here. If I right click and I choose create shape layer, I want to show what happens. So right now it created this layer, but it created nothing within my composition. So what happened is because you have to actually add the content. So you have to choose what do you want to create. So if I went down here and went into my contents, I would have to say add, I want to add as an ellipse. Okay, so now it's created again, but it's just created an outline. So if I wanted, I have to go again through here and say, okay, what do I want with this content? So if I went and said, I want to create a fill, and now it's bringing in those property values that I can now change to make a shape. So and noticing when you do a right click or create a layer, you're going to have a little bit more to do. You still have the, the choices that you can make, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually delete this layer and I'm going to show you another way. So if I wanted to just come up here and let's go ahead and actually create a shape, and this time I'm going to create a rectangle. Alright, so when I start to create this rectangle, notice that now it's already creating some of those properties that before I had to go in and select myself or add to that layer. Alright, so the reason it's doing that is because up here it will give you the options. So I have these options to change, alright, and I can change it right here within while I'm creating, which is pretty nice. Alright, so if I know I want to create, an ellipse or a rectangle or a star, I can do so just right up here instead of creating a layer. But I can still come up down here within our contents, and as it created the rectangle, it created the stroke, the fill, which I can still manipulate and change if I want to. So with this stroke, notice that's got a stroke width of 2 if I wanted to really jump up that size and make it black. So I've got that options to do down here, as you can see. Now we even have some other options if we are have our shape selected. We can go down here and we've got some cool things we can do down here. So let's look at the pucker and bloat. All right, so it kind of changed that, and if I go into that and say, you know what, I really want to manipulate this shape. So you again can keyframe this because notice anything that has a stopwatch is saying you can animate this and set different key points or keyframes along your timeline. So you can do something like that. Let's go ahead and delete that. And let's look at maybe one more. So if I add, and again, there's different ones. So like wiggle transform, you can twist. All right, let's look at the twist one. And I'll probably go to that repeat one too because that can be a good feature. But with this, I can do the angle if I want to. Okay, even with the center, you can manipulate the center to make it look like a flag. Maybe it was like waving in the wind if you wanted to kind of over time let it. Yeah, I don't know. Just being creative, just trying to think. We'll look at the last one because I don't want this video to get too long for the first one. But the repeater, this one is very nice if you're trying to read. So right now it's saying copy of 3. Okay, you can make it, 10 copies if you want. And as I do that, notice it made all those copies. Kind of, over time you'll figure out with the repeat, how do you want it to look. Again, sometimes it will take me some time to think about, okay, where do I have to transform for the position. But those are some things that you have to do, or that you can do within creating shapes. And so that's really looking at it really quick. But just want to reemphasize what we talked about in chapter 2, talking about the difference between vector graphics and raster images with your pixels. So remember, a vector graphic is kind of with those mathematical objects called vectors. They are created by lines and curves, so they're going to remain crisp no matter what you do to its size. So when you resize it, they're going to remain with that resolution, making it look crisp and nice. And those are a lot of times of what you're going to create within After Effects. So if I am creating a mask path or shape on shape layers, text, anything like that, that's created inside of After Effects will remain those vector graphics. And even if I import certain vector graphics if I'm working with Illustrator, but you have to make sure you're keeping that size or that image and that format to be able to resize and keep the crispness. Now, if you're looking at the raster images, so like bitmap images, they're going to be more towards that rectangular grid, or the pixels that are saying this is the location, this is the color for this pixel. So things that you import like video images or video footage, images, image sequences, anything like that, and even certain things that you bring in, if they're a pixel, you can't really resize them or you're going to lose this quality. So that's really quick, just looking at shapes. And we're going to continue on looking at the shapes, but just remember the difference between the vector graphics and your pixel graphics that you're going to create, and also the difference between shapes for creating a shape as a shape layer or creating a shape for using as a mask.